Hey everyone, my name is Justin from Inlight Studio, and in this tutorial I'm gonna go over a Photoshop technique that I use to sharpen my photographs. You may have come across some images and photos on the internet that have this amazing quality of sharpness to them, and it makes you wonder, are the photographers nailing the focus that well, or is it just sharpened in post? And most of the time it probably is actually enhanced slightly in post-production. So I'm going to go over a technique that I use to do that, because the awesome thing is with Photoshop, it's possible to bring back a lot of fine detail that you would otherwise not even know is there, and it just adds some extra wowness to your shot. I'm not sure if I made that word up, but anyway. So there's a lot of sharpening techniques that are really in Photoshop. The simple ones, like if you go to Filter, Sharpen, there's the Unsharp Mask and the Normal Sharpen, which are all great. They do work, but the one that I'm going to show you today, as taught by Calvin Hollywood, is pretty much the best one to bring back detail without it seeming like it's overly processed or just weird looking. So I find this one seems to work the best for me. Hopefully you do too. So let's get started. I can close this. So as an example, I'm using this shot that I took of my cousin. It was a winter portrait that we did in studio. So this is already edited the way I like. I've done all my retouching and so on. You can just have a look at the before and the after. So the final step would be to sharpen this and then save it out for distribution on the web and my portfolio and so on. So let's get started. First thing we've got to do is merge all of the edits into a new layer. So the quickest way to do that is Control, Alt, Shift, and E on your keyboard. And what that does is it merges everything underneath it into this top layer. What I would also say is, before we go any further, is that I am assuming you've got a bit of general knowledge when it comes to Photoshop and just understanding layers and masks and blending modes and things. If you don't, I'd recommend you first get to know the basics of Photoshop, just to understand how this works. You don't necessarily need to understand the math behind this technique, just that it works. And that's all we pretty much need to know. So, okay, we've created a new layer. The next step would be to duplicate this layer twice. So we press Ctrl J, press it twice, and it's made two copies of that layer. And next we've got to group this. So you select the two, press Ctrl G, and that puts them into a new folder. Let's group them. We can just rename this to Sharpen, just so we keep ourselves organized. So those two new layers are in this folder. And the next step is going to be, we need to change the blending mode of the folder from pass through, and we're changing that to overlay. Makes it look kind of all contrasted. Next we're going to change the top layer in this folder to vivid light. So changing that blending mode to vivid light, and it just got even darker. So just to recap, the folder goes to overlay blending mode and the top layer goes to vivid light. Next we've got to invert this layer that we've just changed the blending mode. So the quickest way to do that is Control I, or you could also go to Image, Adjustments, and Invert, and everything's gone back to normal. So if we just isolate this layer, you can see what we've done. We've made it look like this X-ray looking thing, which is a pretty cool effect, but not what we're doing today. So alright, next we're going to go to Filter, Blur, and Surface Blur, which is quite odd that a blurring filter would bring back detail, but like I said, it works, so I won't argue with it. Let me just zoom in here so you can see what we're doing. Alright, so we can see the detail on his face. Now if we're going to go to Filter, Blur, and Surface Blur, if we push the threshold up, you can really see that it's starting to bring back a lot of this fine detail in like the pores and the eyes, and this is obviously quite an exaggerated form of it. This is kind of like pushing the clarity slider in Lightroom, which you don't want to go too far, otherwise it just looks very unnatural. but you can kind of see what it's doing to the image and bringing back a lot of fine detail. So what I use for threshold levels is generally between 10 and 15 is a kind of good range to use. We can leave this one at about 13 or so, and same thing with the radius. You want to keep that fairly low, between 8 to 15 pixels. So I'll just leave it there at 10. This should be good. So we can see the detail that it's brought back in the shot. If we turn preview off, it's gone back to being almost hazy like, and turn it back on, and we can see the sharpness that's come back, which is pretty cool. And then we click OK, and it's applying the blur to the layer. So there we go. That's pretty much how we sharpen the image. Now if we can even go down here to the coat and just have a look at how it's enhanced even these little fibers and things on it. If we turn sharpen layer off, let's come back to normal and turn it back on, you can really see how it's brought some life back into it, which is awesome. And then the last thing we can do is, since we've kind of exaggerated this effect, we can dial it back a bit just to get it looking more natural. So I'll usually put it on about 75%, and that just takes some of the sharpness away, but not too much. So there we go again, before and after. So that's pretty much how I sharpen images as a final step in my post-processing workflow. Hopefully it's a tip that proves useful to you as well. Thanks for watching. If you have any feedback or requests, please feel free to contact me, and keep a lookout for more of my videos and tutorials at inlightstudio.com. Cheers for now.